The warmth of summer calls you out for fun in your Geauga Park district. Venture into the great outdoors, 25 parks with a huge variety of hiking, biking, and fishing opportunities for all ages and abilities. Your next adventure starts now at geaugaparkdistrict.org.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you guys all for coming in today. I know we couldn't give you a lot of information ahead of time because this entire thing was unfolding as we speak, and we're able now to release this information, and we're pretty proud of the work that's been done here on this case. For the past 26 years, the Geauga County Sheriff's Office has been working very hard to solve a case of Geauga's baby. Today we announce that the case has been solved thanks to the hard work of the men and women of the Geauga County Sheriff's Office over the past 26 years, and the suspect is in custody. On March 25th, 1993, the Sheriff's Office responded to a call on Sidley Road in Thompson Township. Reports were that there was a baby laying in the road, and some people even reported that it looked like a doll. The first deputy on the scene found a deceased newborn baby in the roadway. The body was partially dismembered by what appeared to be animals. Part of the umbilical cord was still attached. The baby boy was sent to the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office, where they confirmed that baby Doe had been born alive, but could not determine the cause of death. An exhaustive investigation began as soon as the baby was found and continues to this day. Due to the fact that we did not know who the parents were, some great citizens of Geauga County took it upon themselves, using their own money, provided for a funeral for baby Doe. They arranged for the funeral, handmade clothing for the baby, and paid for a headstone calling him Geauga's child. They forever memorialized him in the Thompson Cemetery. To this day, they care for his grave, leaving gifts and flowers. Over the past 26 years, Geauga County deputies have followed up on hundreds, if not thousands, of leads. They never gave up. Even after they retired, some of them still volunteered to come back and help out with this case. Due to recent developments in DNA and the ability to identify potential family members, the Geauga County Sheriff's Office and Prosecutor Jim Flaze's office teamed up to explore this new technology. In September of 2018, our detectives identified distant family members of Geauga's child. Through this process and much hard work, a family tree was produced consisting of over 1,400 people in an effort to identify the parents of Geauga's child. These people were from around the world in different countries when they started. They were narrowed down by their DNA that they had previously submitted voluntarily to an online database. With their permission, we were able to compare their DNA to one another and to Geauga's child. A search warrant was issued for who we felt was the mother of Geauga's child. At that time, she admitted that she had birthed the child, placed him in a trash bag, and left him in a wooded area. She also admitted to a similar crime that occurred 2 years prior to the birth of Geauga's child. This case is still under investigation. This morning, Prosecutor Jim Flaze convened a special grand jury. Gail Eastwood Ritchie, age 49, of Euclid, Ohio, was indicted for aggravated murder and murder. She has been arrested and is currently on her way to the Geauga County Jail. The investigation continues, so we cannot comment additionally on other charges. I would like to thank the family members that were contacted and assisted with the investigation. Without their cooperation, we may not have solved this case at this time. I've been told that this is the 51st case in the nation solved using this investigation tool. I would also like to thank all of the employees over the last 26 years that have worked tirelessly to speak for Geauga's baby and solve this case. I know that it gives peace to not only the deputies, but also the community that this case has been solved. Over 26 years ago, Gail Eastwood Ritchie left her biological child for dead. To this day, even though she admitted her involvement, she shows absolutely no remorse and takes no ownership of the baby. For this reason, this child will rest in the Thompson Township Cemetery and will always be known as Geauga's child.
Sheriff, why has this case stayed with you and all the investigators that were out there on that day in 1993?
Well, at this particular day, I personally was there that day, and anytime that you have a death of a child, let alone a newborn child that obviously cannot speak for themselves, we have to do that speaking for them, and nobody would let that rest until we could solve this case.
As far as the science, can you, in common man's terms, if you were to describe to someone how, for instance, the Golden State Killer case may have affected your thought process in this, and why you decided to undertake that kind of familial DNA testing?
Well, for 26 years, our detectives and our deputies have been following up on every lead. And when we found out that there was a possibility that this could work, our detectives jumped right on it and made that effort, and obviously it paid off.
Do you think that the animals that may have come upon the child dragged it to the roadway, or how it got there, since she left it in a wooded area?
That's what we believe happened, that the animals had carried the child out into the road.
Any idea of distance from where, how far off the road she placed?
She described it that she left it in a wooded area, so we're not sure exactly how far, but it was a ways.
Sheriff, was she expecting you, and what was her interaction with the investigators when you showed up with an indictment in hand?
Her reaction was that she had not even thought about this until we brought it up. She completely put it out of her mind. She always referred to the baby as an it. She really had no emotion as far as that's concerned.
You said there was another baby 2 years prior that she had done this to?
She admitted to doing this 2 years prior to that.
And according to what appears to be her on social media, she has actually gone on to live a somewhat normal life. What was it like addressing her today? I mean, someone who was very comfortably living in the suburbs and having other children, and does not appear by any appearances to be someone capable of this.
I can't tell you how anybody could do something like that. I don't know how you could, wake up the next morning like that, let alone 26 years later, and raise a family and go on like a normal person. I don't know how you do that.
Sheriff, what are the circumstances involving that other case?
It was very similar. She gave birth, put the baby in a plastic bag, and disposed of it.
Where?
In Cuyahoga County.
How
Do
did
you
she have
believe
the...
both cases that child was alive when it was placed into a bag and left?
What was the question?
Do you believe in both cases the child was alive when it was placed into a bag and left?
It's hard to tell on the first one because we don't have any evidence. There's no body been recovered. That's been turned over to Cuyahoga County authorities.
Sheriff, is the suspect married, and are there any other children in her life?
Yes, she is married to the father of this child, and she has 3 adult children.
Can you speak to what she was doing at the time, possibly working as a nanny?
That's one of the stories. We're still following up on a lot of that stuff. There's a couple different possibilities. There was a camp out in Geneva, which is near where this is, that she also worked. So there's still some more investigation to do, but we wanted to, get this case solved and get her arrested.
And she didn't live anywhere near this. Her connection to this area might have been then through that camp.
Correct.
You said she's married to the father of this child. Is he facing any charges in this?
We're still under investigation.
For 26 years, he had to have wondered what happened. Clearly at one point she had to have been pregnant, and then there's no baby. Did she ever get into what she told him?
Obviously, I can't tell you what he was thinking, but her statement was that she hid the pregnancy and that nobody knew she was pregnant.
Now, you said that the baby was proven to have been born alive. Do you have any indication that it was alive when it was disposed of, or that it had died and then disposed of?
Very difficult to figure that out by the pathologist report, because the lungs had inflated with air. He is 100% certain that the baby was born alive.
Was the same father the one of the previous baby too?
I don't know if we know that.
Sheriff, if you would, talk, if you know, about the history of sort of this familial DNA testing, sort of where it led you, how you kept getting closer, and you mentioned the cooperation of other family members. In what ways did they cooperate?
Well, I'm going to let Detective Seaman cover that, because he is the one that did this and has been on this since September, and he can better explain the DNA part of it.
Could you come up with your first and last name? You could spell the last name, please.
Donald Seaman, S-E-A-M-O-N. We would reach out to these family members that we identified in the family tree, and we would talk to them. They would confirm who their family members were, because we were putting together the family tree through open source network, like birth records, obituaries, and then we would either ask them if they would voluntarily submit to DNA, or they had already submitted their DNA to a private source, and we would ask them if they would be willing to put it into the public source, which is where we were able to put the baby. When they did that, we were able to compare the relationship not only to the other family members, but to that of the baby. So we started with 1,400 person family tree, and essentially narrowed it down piece by piece till we got to the mother.
How long did that take?
We got the first results in September of 2018.
Did Gail Ritchie specifically submit DNA as part of this?
We had a search warrant for her DNA, which was sent for testing
And when did you get that search warrant?
approximately 2 weeks ago.
Have you interviewed her as part of this investigation?
I had.
So she knew you guys were onto her at some point?
She did. We had contacted family members who had previously alerted her to the fact that we were getting close. So she was waiting for us, if you will.
Was the body of the second child in Geauga County, was that body ever recovered by authorities back in those days?
No, it was not.
Did she say where she dumped it?
She gave us some pretty specific area where she had taken the first baby, and that was 30 years ago. And there's no evidence there. There's nothing left.
Is there a booking photo of her that we can have?
Not yet, but we do have a photo we're going to give you.
I'm going to give you the photos here when it's done.
I want to introduce our prosecutor, Jim Flays. He's going to talk about the charges and what's going to happen next.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Could you spell your last name, please?
It's F-L-A-I-Z.
Thank you.
So this morning, the grand jury did meet, and they were presented with this case, and it was a special grand jury session. And as a result of the grand jury presentment, an indictment has been filed. An indictment was filed this morning, which I'll distribute a copy of afterwards. And Ms. Ritchie has been charged with 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of murder. The aggravated murder count is committing the murder with prior design and calculation or premeditation. The indictment was sealed until she was arrested. She was arrested and brought to the jail early this afternoon. And at this point in time, from a legal process standpoint, she'll appear for a arraignment, possibly tomorrow, maybe Monday, before Judge Paschke in the Common Pleas Court. And that will be her initial appearance and likely arraignment in Common Pleas Court. This is a direct indictment from the grand jury. There wasn't an arrest and then a presentment to the grand jury. So because it's a direct indictment, it will be presented. She will appear directly in Common Pleas Court. Like I said, maybe tomorrow. If not tomorrow, definitely on Monday.
Has a bond been set in the case?
No, she will be held, because of the direct indictment, it will be an initial appearance in Common Pleas Court, so it's a little different than the normal procedure of appearing in municipal court.
So she'll have to spend at least tonight in jail?
Correct. Additionally, I did want to say, because I know the Sheriff's Office is pretty modest about their efforts in this case, and a lot of people focus on the DNA evidence in this case, which is significant. The DNA is an interesting story. There have not been a lot of cases nationally I think you mentioned the Golden State Killer. This was the same technique used in that case that was employed in this case. But this isn't as simple as obtaining DNA and putting it into some database and just getting a name. This was literally hundreds and hundreds of hours by Detective Seaman and the personnel at the sheriff's office. A lot of search warrants, a lot of interviews that took them not only all across the United States, but around the world. And so it's easy to say, well, we have this new DNA technology, and one of the things that we were talking about, and put this in context, this is a couple years before the O.J. Simpson trial. So think of where DNA was in 1993 versus where DNA is now. And I really applaud the sheriff's office not only for employing this new technique, but also that just gives you investigative leads. It takes good old-fashioned detective work to follow those leads, interview potential suspects, and link potential family members with our area and with the area where the body was found. And so it's not just as simple as, well, these guys got some DNA and figured this case out. There was a lot of good old-fashioned police work involved here.
Is this like a 23andMe sort of thing where it initially came out of, or?
The 23andMe database and some of those people who send their DNA into that, they can elect to have it publicly available or not. So through the publicly available sources, the Detective Seaman was able to trace, the initial trace was back to great-great-grandparents that were born in the early 1800s. And so from using different family trees and that, the detectives were able to determine the family and then went through that process of obtaining additional DNA samples, some voluntary, some we obtained through search warrants once we obtained probable cause, and kind of went through constructing and narrowing down who the family members could be until they ultimately arrived at this defendant.
And this wasn't great-great-grandparents that submitted DNA, it was somebody whose DNA went back to the great-great-grandparent level, right?
Correct.
We have a copy of the indictment.
And
Yes, I will hand that out at the end.
like your office, this happened 26 years ago. How often are you continuing to investigate, cold cases? Or is it the success of things like the Golden Gate, killer that, you guys take a look and say, hey, we got some DNA, why don't we take a look?
I would say that we are investigating cold cases every day. Anytime that we have some new information, new technology, fortunately, evidence has been preserved well that we can go back and do testing that maybe wasn't available then. So all cases are cold, but they're always on our mind, and we know which ones they are.
You said you've spoken with Ms. Ritchie, and that her demeanor was, I can't exactly remember your word, but nonchalant, basically. Can you expound on that just a little bit?
I think that she was really uncaring. I mean, it didn't seem to bother her. She's been living with this for 30 years and has done this twice, apparently, and I don't think it really bothered her.
Where did you arrest her?
About an hour ago.
No, but where? Was it at her home? At that place of work?
No, it was,
In Cleveland.
yeah, in Cleveland.
Now, 26 years ago, this happened, it's been a cold case, and I'm sure you've had a lot of folks who work for the department retired. What's it like calling those guys and letting them know to put closure on this? I mean, it's got to be, it's
Well,
a double-edged sword, I guess.
There was one particular sergeant that worked back then that was the first one on the scene, and he was the first one I called to tell him, because even when he retired, he said this is one of the cases that really bothered him. And when we spoke yesterday, he was just so happy that it was solved before he died, is what he told me.
Sergeant Dewey.
And I got to tell you that this case has affected our community, our county, obviously more than her family. And this is evidence of that. This is the headstone, and they keep that up. This picture was taken this week. They maintain the flowers there, they maintain the gifts that they put down, and it's just great to live in Geauga County where everybody cares.
Any other questions?
Yeah, why no charges against her husband?
Still under investigation.
Is there a possibility he could be charged?
I guess if the evidence, you want to say something?
Well, I would say that an indictment's just a probable cause finding by the grand jury. It's not a guilty finding. Certainly that she still has a right to a trial like anyone else. The grand jury indictment just represents a probable cause finding. So that's the stage we are at now. We do not have evidence at this time to present any other individuals to the grand jury for a potential probable cause finding.
I wanted to be clear on something with the DNA. Was any of the DNA used, did it come from anybody who had prior arrests and was already in the system?
No.
No, all private database sort of?
Voluntary, the majority was voluntary submissions.
Okay.
The CODIS database that is what's maintained, I mean, keep me honest here, but the CODIS database that's maintained by the Attorney General's office, where they take the DNA from anyone who's arrested for a felony, that DNA database is different than what is utilized by these private labs to find familial matches. And it's my understanding that the Attorney General's office DNA database is not set up to do familial matches at this time. So we, at the county's expense, the sheriff and I, we spent money to utilize kind of a private route to find these DNA matches because the government-run database is not there yet.
Sheriff, the maiden name, is it Richwood or Ridgewood?
Eastwood.
Eastwood.
Gail Eastwood Ritchie.
And she would have been known as what in 1993?
Gail Eastwood,
And how old at that time?
approximately 22.
Is that G-A-I-L?
That's correct.
Her name and address is on the indictment. Did the indictment make its way around,
Yep.
John?
I don't have.
Any,
No, that's it.
I didn't get it.
No, that.
any other cold cases you might be employing this technique?
I will employ this technique on every cold case that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One for you and behind you.
Make it this way.
Do you need to follow as well?
Get that.